we've replicated these findings many times. When I'm going to simplify this graph to say where there's circled there, those are fetuses, third trimester fetuses of women who are depressed or highly anxious, compared all the way out to the right here. I'll use my cursor to low anxious women. Those fetuses had greater reactivity to their mother's experience of stress in our lab. And what we know about this is there are no baseline differences in where the fetal heart rate started. And actually, in the maternal physiology that got activated during the stressor experience, the women were comparable across the groups. However, it was the fetuses that differentiated if their mothers were depressed or highly anxious. They were more reactive. So what this signifies to us is that if a door opens suddenly, and I really wish we were all in a room together so the door could open suddenly as a test for us, and we would see some people would jump a great deal and others would be calmer. So we're seeing some fetuses are more highly reactive to that door opening. The mothers change in their physiology to stress, the same stimuli across all groups, but some fetuses are more reactive, and they're more reactive if their mothers are depressed or anxious in pregnancy. So we wanted to see if we could also see differences in babies' brains before the postnatal influence, and babies sleep very well in the MRI scanner. This was the paper that came out. Let me give you the take-home message. Oh, excuse me. Take-home message is that an arresting state functional magnetic resonance imaging study, newborns exposed to untreated maternal depression versus no depression have less connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. They're a more reactive brain, less ability of the prefrontal cortex to dampen down the amygdala. The amygdala very much monitors and manages our emotion experiences. And really intriguing to us and consistent with, so the data is consistent, those fetuses that had that greater heart rate reactivity during the mother's stressor, they were the fetuses of depressed and anxious women, they also had less of that connectivity, less of the prefrontal cortex being able to dampen down the amygdala. And we also saw that this fetal heart rate reactivity is associated with infant behavior. So in work by my close colleague, Elizabeth Werner, fetuses who were more reactive in utero went on at 4 months to be more behaviorally reactive to novelty. And these findings are consistent with others we're following on work from Jerome Kagan and Nancy Stidman, that early reactivity at 4 months is itself a prediction of adult anxiety disorders. And then in some other work, those reactive 4-month-olds go on to be inhibited children. And then as adults, they have more amygdala reactivity to novelty. So we can really see and connect the dots of going from being a fetus reactive in your heart rate and then going to our work at 4 months old, a more reactive baby, more reactive brain at birth, and then drawing on other people's work to see that this is a risk for adult anxiety disorder, and even independent of an anxiety disorder, more reactive amygdala, and indicating harder time managing emotions. So maternal mental health and prenatal programming, we're seeing maternal distress associated with greater reactivity to the environment. From an evolutionary perspective, prenatal distress exposure forecasts an adverse, dangerous environment to that offspring. So having heightened reactivity, this might be adaptive. Be prepared for a challenging postnatal environment to come. But the consequences for the child, how is the match between the prenatal environment, the cues you got, foreshadowing that environment, and what the postnatal environment is actually like? If you're a very reactive being and you're in a classroom, 21st century USA, that's overcrowded and you're supposed to stay focused, that might be hard to do. You might be very reactive to different stimuli. That starts to look like a profile of an ADHD or an anxious child.